It's good to see you today. Hope you're having a good day. Yesterday we looked at Daniel. We're still in the time of the captivity, so today we need to look in Esther. Let's look at our hymn first, but we're going to be thinking about Esther and Mordecai and the plot against the Jews, such things as that. But today's hymn is "Oh, for a faith that will not shrink."
Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whate'er may come, we'll taste and hear the hallowed bliss of an eternal home.
Let's look at our passage we're going to look at now. We're going to just begin in Esther 1. And just to give us somewhat of an overview, Esther chapter 1 came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This was the one who reigned from India to Ethiopia. We're still in the times of the Persians and the Medes, down in verse 3. Chapter 1 speaks about his queen at the time, Vashti, and she ends up refusing to come when he calls. She ends up refusing to come when he calls, and she is displeasing to the king, let's say. And so she's deposed, more or less. And after this, you have young virgins who are sought for the king. And eventually, as the call goes out, just for young women all over the provinces are going to be brought to the king. And eventually, you have Esther, who is going to please the king. Now, I want you to notice verse 10, though. Esther had not revealed her people or family for Mordecai, and that would be her uncle. Her parents had passed away. Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And so that's chapter 2. The end of chapter 2 is Mordecai discovering a plot against the king, and that's going to come into play later on, because he is going to basically save the king's life, and it's going to be recorded. But then we get into chapter 3, and we have the account of Haman. And Haman, who is promoted by the king, is aggravated as he can be, because while everyone else is paying homage to him, bowing down and paying homage, verse 2, Mordecai does not. So I would suggest this is more than just simple respect. There's something else going on here. It looks like, I would say, Mordecai does not, and it just infuriates Haman. We'll talk more about that as we go along, because what Haman does, and we'll talk more about it especially in tomorrow's brief study, but Haman is going to manipulate the king, frankly, and an edict is going to go out to destroy all the Jews. That's what's on the line. Now we get to chapter 4. Mordecai learns what has happened. He tears his clothes. He goes and he sits in front of the king's gate. And Esther sends a messenger. And we start having this back and forth between Mordecai through the messenger to Esther. Verse 7, Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him and to plead before him for her people. So the messenger told Esther the words of Mordecai. Esther spoke to the messenger Hathach, and gave him a command from Mordecai. It says, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law, put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words. Mordecai responds, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink. Let's make this point. There is a time for discretion, and that's why I wanted to go through and skim through the account, and that verse that I paused on and highlighted. Mordecai had charged Esther not to reveal, he had charged Hadassah not to reveal her ethnicity, that she was a Jew. They were not just pulling virgins from the Jews, they were pulling virgins from all over the provinces. So Mordecai tells her, effectively, keep it to yourself. He who has faith, keep it to himself. Anyway, that's a verse from the New Testament. But he tells her to be discreet. And that's what she is. Haman does not realize that you're wanting to kill all the Jews, and you know the queen's a Jew, right? Haman doesn't know that because of this discretion. There is a time for discretion. There's a time to keep one's faith to themselves, so to speak. There is a time to not give that which is holy to the dogs. There is a time to shake the dust off your feet and move on. All of those things takes a good bit of wisdom, but there is a time for discretion. But there's also a time for defiance. And that's what it has come to now. And Esther says it. Esther says, I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. There's a time for discretion, but there is a time for defiance. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink. I don't think her faith was shrinking before. That's not what I'm saying. There's a time to be discreet, and there is a time, there's a time to be covert, and there is a time to be overt. And it has now come time to be more overt. And so there's a time for defiance. And that's what it has come to. And they needed to realize, and Mordecai is trying to get Esther to realize what is at stake. And he says that God's people will be rescued one way or the other. The only reason he has faith in that is because the Messiah is promised. In order for the Messiah, who's going to be a Jew, to come from the tribe of Judah cannot be wiped out. The people of God cannot be wiped out. And so Mordecai, in faith, says, there at the top of the screen, deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but providentially, perhaps you're here just for such a time as this. But they needed to realize, she needed to realize, what was at stake. And there was a battle going on. They didn't realize it, but there was. There was. And in today's day and age, sometimes people don't realize there's a battle going on. They don't realize that the Lord is looking for soldiers. They don't realize it because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. If we had carnal weapons, if the church, if God's kingdom used carnal weapons, probably more people would realize it. But that's not the sort of battle, and that's not the sort of kingdom the Lord is looking for. It's not the sort of kingdom the Lord has established. He says to Pilate, My kingdom is not of this world. If it was, my disciples would fight. He's talking about a carnal fight. We do fight, but it's not like that. We have to think about what is at stake. And what is at stake is, of course, our salvation and the salvation of others. Nehemiah, which we're going to be looking at Nehemiah in a few days, Nehemiah says, fight for your families, fight for your sons and your daughters. And that's what we do. That's what we do. There's a time to be discreet. There's a time to defy. And we better realize just what is at stake. Appreciate you. I hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.